Three. Oh, yeah, there he is. The best economist in the whole wide world. Dean Baker, thank you for joining me. And now, new improved Dean Baker, because he's adapting to new media, you're launching a podcast. Congratulations. Where can people find it? What's it called?
Thanks, Pete. It's called Mostly Economics, and we'll have it up on our web, cpr.net. First one is May 1st. Great day to start with Stephanie Kelton, who a lot of people have heard of as one of the leading promulgators of modern monetary theory. So we have a good discussion of that. It's a little dated. She asked me, we told her it's getting up, and she goes, remind people we taped it about a month ago. So we'll try to be more up to date in the future. But in any case, it should be a good segment.
I'm very excited to hear you in conversation with Stephanie Kelton. I have several sycophants of her and her theories that listen to this show. I am a huge Dean Baker fan. Whatever you say goes with me. I'm not arguing with Dean Baker, and I've got a bunch of things to go through. I'm a supporter of yours on Patreon, and I love and always have loved your piece. Your piece is commenting on the press, Beat the Press, CEPR.net. If you're not reading and following Dean Baker, then you don't know what's happening. And Dean, somebody yesterday said, economists right now are to epidemiologists in December 2019. Like, you see what's coming, right? Like, how much of a different way, how many different ways can it go at this point?
Well, most of the ways it could go are bad, and the question is bad to worse. So we're on a path with these tariffs where you remember the supply chain problems that are pandemic. We're about to see them again. And in this case,
you sure about that? You got to be sure.
I mean, Trump could change his policies, but the reason why I'm sure, this is one of these things that's about as predictable as you get. The boats aren't coming.
That's what I hear.
So if the boats aren't there, the supplies aren't there, So you had a lot of stockpiling. Some of that came out in the GDP data today, but that was continuing. So you had a lot of businesses. They saw this coming. They said, we better stockpile. So they're doing that. They've done that. So they have big stockpiles. But the boats already, the traffic is way down from year ago levels. This week, it's going to be down even more next week. So we will start seeing shortages. Again, what shows up when, where, that you'd have to know more detail than I do, but we will certainly start to see shortages of a lot of things in 2 to 3 weeks. And then there's longer term questions. Again, Trump, I'm not one of his confidants, so I don't know if he's going to back away from his tariffs, but you have to plan ahead, not me personally, but businesses have to plan ahead. So businesses looking for building up their stockpiles, Christmas toys, Christmas presents, all these things people buy in the fall, holiday season, they have to be placing those orders very soon. And you have to get the factories. A lot of them are in China. You're welcome not to like them, but that's the reality. A lot of them are in China. And if they're not producing them, we're not going to see this stuff come holiday season.
I already got my Halloween costume. Same thing every year. And for Christmas, I'm just giving people plants. You can't stop me. You can't stop me.
Well, that's great. I love plants. I think that's a great gift. But, better or worse, people aren't coming to me for their Christmas giving advice. So, they want to get computers. They want to get toys. They want to whatever. That's what people want to do. And
all the toys come from China. Like 80% of toys come from China. I'm like, what? All right. Well, so GDP numbers came out today. You got a great post up already. 6 quick thoughts on the first GDP report. It could change in the next couple months. Those numbers can change. You taught me in that post. But the question I have for you is, what did the economy in our country look like at the end of last year? And how is it looking now?
It's really mind-boggling because, again, Trump is in a different world. One never knows what he thinks, who knows. But just the things he says, he goes, we inherited a disaster. You go, no, you inherited the best economy of really any president I could think of in my lifetime. We could maybe argue about the economy Clinton handed off to Bush in 2001. But you had low unemployment, 4% unemployment. Real wages were growing about 1.5% a year. We had inflation coming down. Maybe it was still higher than people wanted, but it was definitely going in the right direction. All the forecasts were that would continue to come down. Economy's growing rapidly. We're creating jobs. People are working from home, which is a great thing. Again, he didn't get any credit for that. We had a factory construction boom. Trump says he wants to bring back manufacturing. Well, we're not going to bring back manufacturing like what we had 40 years ago, but we did see a huge increase, unprecedented increase in factory construction under Biden. I don't think anyone knew that. I know reporters, economic reporters that didn't know that. They think I'm making it up. I give them, here's the data. It's government data. You can look it up. I didn't make it up. It's right there. But
no,
anyhow,
that's the most, I do think you're gonna talk about this. I'm sure if we have time, but in terms of economic reporting, it does seem to be one of the most underreported stories because Trump and his dumb minions are talking about bringing manufacturing back to America. But one of the most underreported things is how much manufacturing, the investments that Democrats and Biden made under two pieces of legislation. And, my parents know about this plant they were building in Syracuse. People know they were building factories. My understanding is the manufacturing plants, some of them that were being built, maybe you can give us some numbers here, have been frozen because they had dealt with things like renewable batteries and renewable energy and things like that. And that's, not clean coal, clean, beautiful coal. So just underscore what was happening with manufacturing as a result of what happened under the Biden administration.
Yeah, so construction of factories literally doubled, and I'm adjusting for inflation. I'm not using phony numbers. So literally doubled, and it's really striking. If you look back, I've gone back about 15 years. Maybe there's a different story if we check the 50s or something, 1950s. But if you look back, factory construction is more or less constant. There's ups and downs, but the amount we spend on factory construction has been more or less constant going back 15, 20 years. It begins to rise very rapidly in 2022. Not a secret. We passed the infrastructure bill. We passed the CHIPS Act to bring back semiconductor manufacturing. And we passed the Inflation Reduction Act to produce clean energy, electric vehicles, batteries, et cetera. And it had the effect. It's as clear as day. But now you have Trump come in and it's two things. One, he hates clean energy. He wants to promote global warming. I mean, it seems that way. I'll just say, I don't know what goes through his head, but so he's trying to cut off funding because a lot of there's subsidies, there's tax credits for people who buy electric vehicles, a lot of things in there to promote clean energy. He wants to nix all of that. He even wants to nix the semiconductor, the CHIPS Act, which is about bringing high quality, cutting edge semiconductor production back to the United States. So he wants, if Biden did it, he's against it. That's kind of the bottom line. Right. You've had manufacturers cut back on these. I can't tell you where that stands. I mean, factory construction is down. That we've seen. How much of that is due to Trump quite deliberately trying to sabotage those bills? I don't have an answer to that at this point.
Well, I interrupted you on the framing of the end of last year, beginning of this year, where the economy was and what we learned with these GDP numbers today, because I think we're pretty screwed. I mean, he took an amazing, you said one of the best economies a president has ever been given during transition. And how would you describe where we're at now based on the data that's available?
Well, it's a mess. I mean, it was a very, very weird report. Now, just the bottom line number, top line number, GDP fell 0.3%. I won't make a big deal about that because, two things. One, whether it falls 0.3%, goes up 0.3%, we could make too much out of it's a negative number. It is a negative number, but we can make too much out of it. The others, these will be revised. So they revised the GDP report. This is called an advance report. Next month, they'll do a preliminary report. Then they do a final report in June for the first quarter. Those are often fairly different. So given that we had very strange numbers, we had a record trade deficit, which is kind of incredible. I mean, that's because everyone's trying to import stuff ahead of the tariff. Now, in fairness, relative to the size of the economy, it's not a record. But if we just say in dollar terms, it was a record trade deficit. That was very strange. Huge surge in imports showed up in inventories. A lot of the stockpiling I was talking about, you could see that very clearly. So firms increased their purchases of computers by 112% or 112% annual rate. So we saw that. So it's a very, very weird report that way. But other things that are distressing that we saw weakening of consumption, so cross categories. One that I like to look at is restaurants. I like to look at that because that's very much discretionary. So right. What we're spending on housing doesn't change that much quarter to quarter. Healthcare, that's not so much how do I feel. I mean, obviously some people can't afford their healthcare. I get that, but that's not most people, thankfully. But you want, how's my budget? How are things going? Well, going to a restaurant, particularly I look at fast food restaurants also because that's not being driven by what Elon Musk is doing. So that fell at about a 3.6% annual rate in the first quarter. It's not catastrophic, but it's unusual. I'll just put it that way. Also, another thing that was striking, fitting with what Trump's been doing, there was a fall in foreign tourism, that 5.5% annual rate. It shouldn't be a surprise that people on their vacation, whether it's from Europe, Japan, wherever it might be, they're probably not that anxious to come here and risk being harassed by, overeager immigration
tourism. How much? That's going to get really bad in terms of foreigners wanting to visit America. Not only are they pissed at us, if they're not pissed at us, they're worried about getting stuck. And if they're not worried about getting stuck here, they're worried about the high prices of things. I'm sure plenty of people will still come to America, go to our parks and Disney and so on, and in New York City and a lot. But man, I mean, it's going to be hundreds of billions of dollars of losses for the tourism industry and for the country, right? Like that, I feel like that's going to be huge, impossible to predict, I guess.
Well, it's going to be large. I mean, if you go to 224. The amount we got from foreigners coming here, and that also includes students, which is another big thing. What students going to come here knowing anytime Marco Rubio hears something bad about you, out, middle semester, out, who's going to come here?
Crazy, yeah.
Yeah, but just by comparison, we get 215 billion last year from foreigners, combination students, tourism, some business travel. Our agricultural exports are 160 billion. So we're talking about 30% more. And there just seems maybe Trump considers a good thing. He doesn't want us to talk to people from Europe and Japan and, Latin America, other countries.
Don't try to speculate. He hates everybody who doesn't love him is the only thing you need to know. I think there's so many good pieces that you've been putting up over at cepr.net. People get them if they subscribe to you on Patreon, which I do. And I got to ask you about two things that I feel like are getting. Well, one thing I heard you make a comment in an interview you did about how one of the issues with tariffs now and forever is the culture of corruption that they can create. Explain how terrorists create corruption and how the most corrupt leader of our generation might be doing that.
Yeah. Well,
countries and companies have to kiss the ring to get an exception.
Exactly. So the tariffs, and particularly the way we administer them, is we give enormous ability to the president to raise them, lower them, grant exemptions for particular types of items. He just did for smartphones. Maybe Tim Cook or Tim Apple, as he calls him, handed him something. We don't know the motivation. I mean, in fairness to him, might have been he was worried a lot of people are going to see $2,000 smartphones and get really pissed, which they would. So I can't speak to the motivation specifically, but there's no doubt about it. It gives incredible opportunities for corruption because you could have companies and countries, go, oh, this is really going to hurt us. Why don't we go down to Mar-a-Lago and, we'll cozy up to Trump, see what he wants. Does he want 5 million? Does he want 10 million? And all of the people who could enforce that are off the job. So you did have people that, were ostensibly independent, within the executive branch who could police that. As it is, they're all gone. They fired them. And then on top of that, you had the Supreme Court ruling, which, I suspect even Roberts, who, of course, wrote the lead opinion as the Chief Justice. He said, this was in discussion. I don't know if it was in the ruling itself. He said, I couldn't imagine a president taking bribes, because needless to say, the dissenters said, well, this opens the door. The presidential immunity clause opens the door. And he basically said, no president would do that. Well, we got a guy sitting there in the White House who sure looks like he's doing that.
Yeah, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has a real issue with his imagination. He also can't respond that people would, be racist and have racist voting laws in our country, or, that campaign finance is a real issue. You have a great piece up about how Doge is costing more money than saving us. It's titled, How Much Has Elon Musk and the Doge Boys Cost Us? Elon Musk's Doge initiative promised $2 trillion in government savings, but he's delivered minimal document savings, you write. Many of them exaggerated or false, while likely causing greater long-term costs through service disruptions, lawsuits, and regulatory rollbacks that benefit the wealthy. This idea of cutting government and saving money is not working. It's going to cost us more money, and you don't need, this is the thing, I don't know if we need Dean Baker. You don't need an economist to tell us this, but tell us this.
Yeah, well, so much of what he did was totally harebrained, and it is. I guess it speaks to the Silicon Valley culture that they're the only ones who know anything, and he goes running around with this chainsaw, and I'm gonna, and everyone wants to get rid of government waste. That's not a controversial position, but the question is, how do you find it? What is it? And again, there are people who've been studying it for years and years, and they fired them first thing. So they have all these inspector generals, in particular the inspector general for the Small Business Administration. They found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraudulent claims in the pandemic programs. Great thing. So why don't we do something about it? Well, what they do, they fired the inspector general. So yes, there is corruption, there is waste, but you have to know what you're doing. You have to look for that. Instead, you just have Musk goes, oh, I'm going to cut 20% of the staff at this agency or that agency. He hasn't looked at the agency. He doesn't know what they do. He went to the FAA. He said that the Aeronautics Administration, and he wanted everyone to take buyouts. And they said, wait a second, we're short of air traffic controllers. He goes, oh, I didn't know that. Maybe before you tried to get people to take buyouts, he went to the National Atomic Security Agency. I think I mangled that slightly, but they're the agency that oversees the safety of our nuclear weapons. And he laid off a large chunk of the staff. And then they told him, no, we need these people. It goes, oh, we better rehire them. But he didn't even have emails for them because he deleted their government emails. So those are just some of the obvious ones. But then you have things like he got rid of direct file, which is this new program initiated under Biden that makes it much easier for people to file their income tax. Most people have very simple returns. They could do it for free. It takes away a lot of anxiety. It's low cost. It's quick. He gets rid of that. Why would you get rid of that? And then the best one, or I shouldn't say the best one, the most egregious, and we see where this stands because it's in court now. The Consumer Financial Products Protection Bureau. Again, it's about getting rid of financial fraud. He gets rid of that. He said delete. He put that on Twitter or X. Delete. Like, oh, that's very clever. This is an agency that gets rid of fraud that my friends are making a lot of money off of. Well. And then, I left out the IRS, which again is really front and center. The IRS,
oh God. Yeah.
He laid off much of the staff of the IRS, which was already understaffed. Biden tried to beef it up. And again, this is game playing by the Republicans. They had all this story about jackbooted IRS. I pay my taxes because I get a paycheck and it comes out of the paycheck. So there's not much they could do with me. They already have my taxes, so there's not much issue there. What the extra agents that he hired are to go after these Wall Street guys and Elon Musk's friends, and make sure they pay their taxes. And if you lay off all the people that do that, well, basically you make taxes voluntary and a lot of people won't pay them then.
What do you have to say? You have a piece also about the cuts in NIH funding and what that's going to mean for drug costs. I suppose that's one of the most important consequences of this is titled How Much of Elon? No, that's not it. Let me find it here. But my question to you is, here it is. Trump's attack on NIH will mean fewer drugs and likely more expensive ones. So you can talk a little bit about that, and people should go read it because there's a lot that you need to read the nuance here when we're talking economics and to Dean Baker. But my understanding, Dean, is the history of America is one of the reasons why we're such a wealthy country is because the federal government invested so much in science and research, developing drugs and treatment that the entire rest of the world buys. A lot of people got rich, but a lot of people got healthier. And this is as a direct result of NIH's funding. And to get an NIH grant, to get federal funding ain't easy. It's easy to demagogue some research project or another and say, why are we studying this or that? But the truth is, anybody who's ever applied for a grant realizes how hard it is to get. My question to you is, what about the cuts in NIH funding? What do they mean for the economy? And of course, what do they mean, as you wrote about, for drug prices?
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, just an incredible story because our drug research, our biomedical research, I should say, because a lot of it isn't drug specific. It's cutting edge. It's we're the world leaders, by far. And China has advances, and okay, maybe they're getting close, but we're the world leaders in that. And this is the way in which we develop new drugs, and a lot of these things have been really great. And I'm not a big fan of drugs. I'm not up there with RFK Jr., but I'm not encouraging everyone go out and you feel bad, take a drug for this, take a drug for that. But the reality is we've had a lot of great cures. The COVID vaccines were great. If we didn't have COVID vaccines, I'm sorry, the anti-vax people, they're nuts. That they prevented millions of people from getting sick and dying from COVID. And it's a long, long list, though. I mean, we eliminated measles. I mean, go down the list. So we've had great successes with research that originally is funded from NIH. And again, that's not going to affect anything tomorrow for the obvious reason you don't get research results tomorrow. It's not that someone at NIH is going to find X, Y, and Z, and then the next day there'd be a drug on the market that will cure cancer. It's a long process, but it will have a big impact. And why you would want to give that up? Both for our health, but also, again, economics. I'm not a fan of the drug industry. I think we should I'll come to that in a second. We should do this very differently. But the fact that you have great innovations that come from that research, to my mind, that's absolutely indisputable. And why you would just, take your chainsaw and just say, wow, we're going to whack it. That's close to crazy. Now, in terms of drug pricing, go, okay, well, one of the things, and I've been at the forefront complaining about it, that one of the things that we could do, it's under the law that if the federal government pays for the research that subsequently is used to make a drug, it has the authority to restrict the prices, have compulsory licensing. So instead of someone having a monopoly on a patent, they would have to license it out to 2, 3, 4 companies, so it'd be competition, bring down the price. Because again, one of the realities that, it's almost hard to wrap your head around. Drugs are almost invariably cheap to manufacture and distribute. They're expensive because we give patent monopolies. So you have cancer drugs, and some of the new ones cost over $100,000 a year. If you just said, "Oh, free market, anyone could sell it," might be hundreds, maybe 1,000, 2,000. You want to have people doing GoFundMe's for the cancer.
Your obvious solution that is never going to happen because of the way that things work in this country, campaign finance and so on. I guess my question to that would be, do other countries that develop drugs, do they ever do that?
They do control their prices way more than we do. So they do limit pricing. So what you find, if you look at Canada, you look Germany, France, pick your country, they'll typically pay half, a third, sometimes even less for the same drugs we have here. Again, I'd like to go a different route. I'd just say, pay for the research up front, because the reality is drug companies do spend a lot on research. We do the basic stuff. Then you get a Pfizer or Merck or someone, they actually bring it through to a marketable drug. I'd say let's pick up the tab for that. I mean, there are different ways you could talk about doing that, but we kind of did that with Moderna. We paid for the research. Then we gave Moderna a monopoly on it. But we paid for the research, the testing. And, if at the end of the day, I mean, thankfully it came up with a good vaccine, but if at the end of the day they come up with nothing, we'd be disappointed, obviously. They would be disappointed, but they got paid, so I would do that do that more broadly. And then you'd have cheap drugs. But yeah, no one else is going that route. I mean, we're really the world leaders, and they kind of follow our pattern.
Dean, I'll let you go. I got one more question in the comments. Most of the comments are commenting on your T-shirt. All dogs are individuals. The best comment is, "I love Mr. Baker's shirt. It makes the stark news slightly easier to take." I love that too. End on China. It's the name of my new band. End on China. What do we need to know about their ability to weather the trade war versus our ability? That's my question, but you can answer any question you want vis-a-vis China.
Yeah. I mean, Trump. Trump's the worst on this, but a lot of people are confused about the relative powers of the U.S. and China here. China could easily weather this. I mean, they lose a big market, but try and think about for a second what the issue is. You have, you're sitting there with your stockpiles of food and, everything else. And I'm hungry and I'm going, well, I'm not going to buy your stuff. Who's that going to hurt more? You're looking to make money selling it to me, but at the end of the day, you could sell it to someone else. You could give it to your family. And that's kind of the position China is in. So it definitely hurts them. There's no two ways about that. But it's so asymmetric. And we're about to see that, because I think we were talking about this a moment ago. The ships aren't coming. So we're about to see huge shortages of toys, of clothes, of parts for for factories, we're about to see that. Now, there's a lot of stockpiling, and so it's not going to hit tomorrow. But if we continue in this pattern where the ships aren't coming, we will be feeling that, probably see some of it before the end of May. And certainly by the summer, we will be seeing a lot of it.
Things are going to change, I think, pretty drastically, it would seem, based on your analysis, for most Americans, certainly for people middle and lower income.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, just infuriating, that so many of these people voted for Trump. And it's just, I'm not blaming them. They were lied to, but it's just unfortunate that, they thought this guy was going to help them, and he's kicking them in the face.
Dean, love talking to you. Excited about the new podcast. Where can people find it? Everywhere the podcasts are?
Yeah, so it's mostly economics, and we will certainly have it on our website, cpr.net. It'll be on YouTube. I imagine a lot of other places as well.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you very much for joining me. I'd love to get you. I want you to hold our hand as much as possible through the next few months and years. As always, I depend a lot on your analysis. I read everything you write, and I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks a lot, Pete. Good talking to you again.